Welcome to TarHeel People, the show in which your friends and neighbors in North Carolina share interesting and useful information. And now, with today's guest, here's your host, Jean Kitchen.
Welcome to TarHeel People, and we're so glad that you chose to join us, and also so glad to welcome back Darrell Allison, President of Parents for Educational Freedom in North Carolina.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Well, you're so welcome, and I have watched with great interest the recent events because of the changes in the General Assembly in Raleigh. Last time we were on, we talked about charter schools, about parental choice, the hallmark of your organization, and it seems like that a lot of opportunities have become available recently that you were fighting for and your organization was fighting for a few years ago, but now they're happening. First off, for people who might not recognize Parents for Educational Freedom in North Carolina, what exactly do you try to do?
Well, you know, as I always say, we are an organization that just believes in good quality education, K through 12 education. When we look at the fact that North Carolina ranks 47th and 50th in terms of low graduation rates, we have over 20,000 dropouts each year. When you look at the African-American boys that were one day Darrell, you know, years ago, they're only graduating at a 41% rate. And so roughly almost 60% of our African-American boys across the state are not getting a high school diploma. And so our organization wanted to lead a change in July 2005 for education reform in K through 12. And again, it's not a posture of anti-public education, because we want to support our good quality public schools. They're good at doing a good job. We want to make sure they have everything that they need in order to best educate our children. But we also have looked at other states, 13 states, including the District of Columbia, that have opened up this idea of, in addition to traditional public schools, private schools, charter schools. And so we want to make sure that North Carolina adopted that tenure as well. And with our charter schools, we have a cap of 100, so there are no more charter schools that can exist here in the state. And with our non-public schools, if you're working middle class, working poor, that's not really an option for you.
Right.
And so we wanted to really open up access for more quality options, not just options, but more quality options, traditional, non-traditional, public charter, traditional, public schools. And so that's what we've been working on for going on 6 years in July. And we're not a political organization, though we understood that one day, and I hope that is the day, that political fortunes would be in the future. We really wanted to make sure that this was a real, true grassroots organization, that we visited many folks across the great state of North Carolina, that we had conversations over coffee.
And I had the privilege, in fact, when you came to Rocky Mount, and I had a lot of questions, and I'm going to share some of those and the great answers that I got with you. Darrell, is this a national organization, and this is the North Carolina branch of this, or how did...
This is a state homegrown organization. You know, my background, I grew up in a little town called Kannapolis, and I was very blessed to have great parents who believed in good quality education, though they did not have a college degree. I knew for me, and it was then a textile town, I knew for me that education would be a vital avenue for me in order to explore, you know, great things, if you will, and was very fortunate to spend some time in D.C. working on Congress on some policy there, and later worked for the Department of Justice in D.C. and came back to UNC Law School. And when coming back to North Carolina, met my wife and had a family. I had, you know, some backings, some giftings, I would say, talents in political science, as well as kind of grassroots organizing. And so there's some leaders who came to me and talked about the idea of leading up this organization in July 2005. And again, what drew me, Jean, was the statistics. Again, I grew up in the public school system in North Carolina. And when I looked at the fact that we were at the bottom in terms of performance, our children weren't doing so well, I grabbed hold of this. And when we started off with 0 supporters, July 2005, today we have over 60,000 supporters across the state. It really is a homegrown North Carolina organization, and that's very, very important.
Darrell, when I attended one of these, that a neighbor of mine in downtown Rocky Mount invited me and several other people to just come and meet you and learn about it. My original concern was you need a parent, where one needs a parent advocate to be able to maximize choices. And so many of the students, the young people who so desperately need changes and need more to be able to go to schools where their needs will be more accommodated, might not have parents who would ever know to advocate. You and I both were very blessed to have parents who made sure that we knew the importance of education. But how do you address that topic?
Well, you know, I think that wherever you find those parents that are advocates, you want to encourage that. Two, you know, in touring the state, this idea that parents are poor, maybe parents of color, you know, talking to some leaders, they're kind of quick to say there's some type of disengagement in terms of their understanding that education, good education, takes a child to the next level. So there are many parents that's in that type of category that very much care about their children's education. I think, Jean, what we have, coupled with the lack of parental involvement that we should be seeing, is that we have a system for decades now that has just been one way, and pretty much has been relegated to the place to where if you are wealthy in North Carolina, you have options. And if you are wealthy, odds are you have a fine home in the traditional schools that you are zoned to, by and large work for you. If you're working poor, working middle class, and you own your home, but your home is like $75,000, odds are the schools that you're zoned to do not work for you. And for those families, it is a 50-50 shot. And for African-American males, it's less than that. That you try to work with the system, and the system for them doesn't work for them. And so you have this apathy, this ambivalence perhaps. And again, this is over decades. And so we see a byproduct of parental school choice, a byproduct of expanding for more families have options, that when you open up the door for parental school choice, where they can attend a school of their choice, that you also indirectly get more parental involvement. And then one sad statistic, and I don't know where we're going to turn this around in a great fashion, but an African-American leader told me, Darrell, when you were growing up in the 70s and 80s in school, African-American, 72% of families that looked like you had two-parent homes. Jean, 2011, that statistic has flipped. Now, 72% of African-American homes in our nation have single-parent homes, and you and I both know the parent that's there in that home and the parent that's not. And so when you look at education, there's no denying education is important, but we're also dealing with so many community issues, familial issues that comes along with that child into that classroom. Now more than ever, we need to look at other educational options, other educational institutions that deal with that just as much as making sure that that child gets a good quality education.
Let's talk about Senate Bill 8. Tom Tillis has visited charter schools. There is a strong interest in, and it might very well pass to get rid of the cap on charter schools. Tell us how that and why that's important.
Well, it's important. We have in North Carolina, we've had this arbitrary cap of 100 charter schools since 1996. And for the first time in history, as of this month, we've reached that cap of 100. And so unless something happened legislatively, there'll be no more charter schools that can be replicated, duplicated. Those successful models that have done, tremendously well for our families, they cannot be replicated or duplicated. Or those models that have done well in other parts of the nation cannot come in and open shop. And so it's imperative that we lift the cap this session, that we free up this cap, this arbitrary cap. My hope is that we'll abolish the cap so that we'll have a proliferation of more quality options such as charters, which are public schools. They're not tuition based. And so it's our heart and passion that more of our middle class working middle class families will be able to have this as an option as well. And so what we did, we found, Jean, 2 years ago that we were talking about public charter schools with many of our elected officials, and come to find out many of them had not even visited a charter in their own district.
Oh, really?
And so when you think about the fact that we've had this since 1996, we've been legislating and making rules and regulations, but we really haven't had that kind of personal connection with these schools. and these myths abound that takes away from traditional funding and things of that nature. We wanted to bridge that gap, and so for a year and a half, we've had about 15 to 20 legislative tours of schools in the district. And also, charters are not the same, and I think that's one of the things that's so unique about public charter schools, that they're in and of themselves. There are charter schools that deal with children that have been sexually abused. It's in the mountains. There are charter schools that deal primarily with African American families in urban areas because of the issues in the community and family. And there are charter schools that deal with gifted and talented. And so we want that kind of variety, just like we have in our traditional schools. We want that for our charter schools. And what we find in our traditional, our charter schools, that there's so much flexibility. You're not set to a certain time frame to educate your child. It's not a rigorous, you have to do this at 3 o'clock and this at 2 o'clock. That you kind of accommodate and work with the community of children that you're dealing with.
Yeah, so not one size fits all.
That's right.
And I said, like ours in Rocky Mount, which has done really well. There is a commitment when a child goes there by the parents that this child will go on past 12th grade.
That's right.
To some form of education, whether it's a community college, whether it's a 4-year university. But they are, from day one, the parents work as a team, or the parent works whichever with a team as the child in the school, to make sure that that child will succeed.
And they've done very well. I'm very familiar with the leadership there. Michael Pratt, who's the headmaster of the school, has done very well. And in one of the schools we always like to model, because that school, it's a preparatory college, that school has 60%, over 60% of their student population are free reduced lunch, mostly minority. And so again, a rural school that's dealing with a target base of students that haven't done fairly well in the traditional public school setting. Those are the kind of models that we're excited about, and hopefully we'll see a lot more Rocky Mount preparatory schools across the state as well.
Darrell, how did the charter schools across the state compare to the scores, the test scores and whatnot of other public schools?
Well, I will say to you that in 1996, charter schools weren't too different, if you will, than our traditional schools. That some started off pretty well, some didn't. And to date, we've had over 30+ charter schools that have shut down. Now, there'll be some that say that's a bad thing, therefore let's throw the baby.
I think it's good. They were overseen and shut down. Yeah. That's
right. But I like to say, Gene, that we're on an upward trend, and there's no denying that. When you look at the 100 charter schools in the state of North Carolina, none of them have been labeled low performing.
Wonderful.
Not one.
Compared to?
We have over 300 traditional public schools that have been labeled low performing. And so I think that's incentive enough. I think every time you start something new, something fresh, a concept, again, 1996 kind of new. It's just now coming to fruition, and people are much more aware of it because of our president's support of it. And our Secretary of the United States, Arnie Duck, in support of public charter schools. I think now more and more people are becoming educated.
And we need to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Stay with us, please. We're back with Darrell Allison, and thank you for staying with us. Your point you were making right before the break about how many of the public schools are low performing, and that's just exactly what we're talking about. When parents are stuck in that area, and I live in Halifax County, and a significant portion of ours were low performing, but the parents don't have the flexibility, if they don't have the funds, to have alternatives, and they're just stuck with a mediocre or less education. So there's a real misconception that you're trying to promote elitism in education, but you're not. You're trying to promote quality.
That's correct, and that's important. We know where our challenges are. We know where kids, for whatever reason, are not doing so well. Why not open up the door to allow for schools that are uniquely positioned, who have a track record of success, who've done astonishingly well. The Harlem School, the school Jeffrey Canada is a school, was highlighted in the movie Waiting for Superman, has done a phenomenal job.
Wonderful.
Urban Prep in Chicago is a school. Actually, the young man, they have 100% of the African American boys, minority boys, going to college, 100% of them going to college.
Fabulous.
He's from Wilmington, North Carolina.
Oh.
And so we've been doing a little lobbying and some communication that once we eliminate the cap here at charters in North Carolina, that we can have those type of leaders come in and talk to our leaders here in North Carolina, and we can replicate and duplicate the models here. We have a wonderful opportunity before us, and I hope politics and posturing doesn't override the other powerful P that I think is important. That's the will of our parents.
And give them choices and let them have. I want to mention, I'm a former public school teacher. My kids went through public school, never went through private school, went to public colleges and universities in North Carolina. You mentioned that you came through the public school system. I'm a huge advocate, 9 years on a school board. So it's not that I'm not supportive of public education. I am, but I just think your statistics bear out that there's so many things that haven't worked for our state, and if our young people have to be our focus in what needs to be done to be sure that they're all getting the best that they deserve.
That's right, and I think one of the points is very, very important, because again, you have this mindset as this versus that. Even in the states, the 13 states in the District of Columbia that have parental school choice, where non-traditional schools and charter schools are part of the equation, the vast majority of families still choose our traditional public school. That this idea that we're going to bankrupt, trample public education as we know it is just not the case. It's a beautiful system that works. Unfortunately, when we look at just not North Carolina, how we rank nationally, but when you look at our nation compared to other countries, it hadn't been going too well.
No.
And where we were #1 across the board, now we're in the mid-tier. There's second, third world countries that are doing very well. And so what we need to do, it behooves us, regardless of the make and model of a school, we need to look and see if that school is working. And if it's a non-traditional school, if it's a charter school, if it's a private school, so what? Let's look and make sure and look at ways where we don't damage our public education dollars, look at ways where the will of families and parents are met, and the children, more importantly, are getting educated. At the end of the day, Gene, and for me and Darrell, people don't ask you or ask me, did you finish high school at the private school, charter school? No, they ask me, did you get a high school diploma?
Right.
and did you get a college degree? You know, and at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's not how you necessarily start, it's how you finish. And I think that's where our focus should be.
Oh, I agree completely. Let's switch and talk about House Bill 344. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading about it. I have read a little bit in the paper about tax credits, not vouchers, but tax credit for people who have children with disabilities.
That's correct.
Why is that important to this organization?
You know, it's very important. It's one of a spectrum of things. When we talk about parental school choices, it's really near and dear to my heart. 2 years ago, we actually, when we began to broach the idea among legislators, Democrat and Republican, our organization facilitated and sponsored a field trip, fact-finding trip to Florida. The state of Florida has the largest special needs program in existence, to where now over 23 families participate, to where Florida, and I think it was under former Governor Jeb Bush, where they were hearing from many families with children with special needs, where because of the uniqueness of the disease and challenges of the children, they needed to have a private sector come and educate their child, whether it be therapy or outright education. And so they open up that window for families. The first year, I think less than 100 parents participated, and now in its 12th year, it's over 20,000 families that are participating in the program. And again, essentially, it's this idea that where our traditional schools are not necessarily meeting the needs of this uniquely challenged child, why not provide a door for them to go find that education with the support of public dollars. And so we have over 200,000 families in North Carolina within the public school system.
Wow.
That have children with disabilities, and they have to get that stamp of labeled disability, what they call IEP.
Individual Education Plan.
That's correct. You know that much better than I. But what we're finding, Jane, and we're inundated with calls, we have stories, we have video of families that are saying we need more. You know, we've identified a school, maybe it's a few counties away. We've identified an institution that will directly address the needs that our child has. And
But we can't
cannot
afford
it. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about, what, $7,000 for that particular child. We're talking about probably twice that amount, particularly with children with special needs. And so we went to Florida, bipartisan group of legislators 2 years ago, and had a chance to tour the schools, had a chance to talk to the legislators there who were the champions for such, and begin the dialogue and discussion and support 2 years ago. And I think this year we have a wonderful opportunity to see that passed. It's passed the Education Committee. It's designed, set to be before Finance and hopefully before the House floor here pretty soon. And again, our hope is that we have that good bipartisan support behind this measure. If we say that children are our most precious commodity, then you can get any more precious than children with special needs. If they're functioning, scale 1 to 10, if they're functioning at their various height at a 5, we want to maximize that 5. You know what I mean?
And if they can get, with the proper training and whatnot, be able to live independently or live in a home where they can have jobs, like in Rocky Mount, we have Tri-County Industries where people with special needs can work. They've got jobs, and to maximize a child's potential is what we should all want.
Yeah, it's not only going to astonish them, but it will astonish us as to what they can be. And so that's very important to us, and we're very hopeful for movement on that.
What are you seeing in Florida? Have they already got some data to support the success of it with children being able to do better because of having that flexibility? They
do, and it's more along the lines of now they're more independent. Some of them have gone on to school, even 4-year colleges in university. So we ran the gamut of the parent, the school leaders there, the elected officials there, and now in this 12th year, they're collecting more data now to be able to document not only the state of Florida, but also how it ranks nationally as well. And so we hope to add our name to that list for sure.
As far as charter schools, aren't all the states around us except Tennessee they have no caps on the numbers of charter schools, right?
That's correct. Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia. Now I may be perplexed here. What's the state above us? But all the states boarding, all the states boarding North Carolina, they do not have a cap, an arbitrary cap on public charter schools. And
in diversity within these schools, I know you referenced the one in Rocky Mount that was 60% African American. What about across the state? Because people might say, it's back to resegregation, or there's no diversity. Just the opposite, right?
That's right. And what I always like to say when we have that kind of discussion among race, let's make sure we're comparing apples to apples. Let's kind of tone it down here, and let's get down to the facts. The facts are, we have close to 2,500 traditional public schools in North Carolina. That's a lot of schools. And then we have 100 charter schools. And so to have a comparison on racial makeup and to have an apples to apples, I believe, comparison is not quite there. What we have, Gene, in North Carolina, we have about 31 of the 100 charter schools that are predominantly 60% minority and 60% free and reduced lunch. Now, there'll be some to say, well, I have issues with that. I say, why? Because I just said that there are no charter schools that have been ranked low performing. And so then you have those that will say, well, Darrell, we want diversity in our schools. Then I like to say to them that I've toured a lot of traditional public schools. And we still know that African American males in those diverse traditional public schools are only graduating at a 41% rate. Now, diversity is important, and nobody wants to constitute resegregation. But I am saying that diversity for diversity's sake should not trump achievement. That when we look at models across the nation, urban prep in Chicago, 100% male, 100% minority. Let me tell you, the parents and those boys there aren't talking about, I've been part of a racist regime. And so there are certain schools, whether it be in the urban or rural areas, that are knocking the ball out of the park. And just because they have a predominant number of minority students and they're poor, well, we have to make sure we're careful what message that we're sending, that even minority poor children can learn.
Right.
Let's just make sure that the environment is set and is appropriate for them to learn. And so that's where I kind of come at diversity, that I want to see a diversity of schools approach, that I want to see those schools that are focusing on this community, focusing on this aspect of our families and our communities, as well as we make sure that we have schools that do not prohibit certain races of people or certain income of people to be able to be at their schools. And so I like the diversity of schools approach and look at these unique models that work.
And I think to be able to replicate within our charter schools, bringing the real leaders, the people who already have the framework in place that we can replicate.
That's right.
To maximize the success is just, how can one not want to support something like that?
That's right, because you hear the argument, well, you know, if we lift the cap on charters, we're going to have a lot of bad charters.
The oversight for them, though, through the State Department of Education, is it comparable to what it is in all the other schools?
It's the same.
I mean,
the charter schools, they have the same tests, they have the same accountability, just like our traditional public schools. They just have a little bit more flexibility within their schools to do what they need to do to educate their child.
Tailor it to the specific needs to maximize the outcome.
And I say to Eugene, I think, you know, the debate should not be public traditional schools versus public charter schools. I think the real issue when you sit down and talk to teachers or school leaders is that they kind of wish they had more flexibility like our charter schools. And I say, let's really look at that. Let's look at the system in which we have been educating our children. Let's look to give our principals, our administrators, our teachers a little bit more flexibility to extend the hours. If we know that children are behind academically, you and I both know we don't need extra time in PE. We need extra time in the classroom. And so let's give our teachers and our administrators more flexibility to be able to do just that.
I'm 100% behind you.
Well, I
and
appreciate
thank
your
you
support.
for what you're doing, and I wish you such luck with House Bill 344 and Senate Bill 8, and encourage people to call their representatives and tell them to support that.
Thank you so very much.
Thank
Jean.
you, Darrell. Have a
Absolute
great
pleasure.
day.
You too.
And thank you to you. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next week.